All right, it's time for our cash tag segment. For that, let's bring in our next guest. That's going to be Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at Likefolio.com. Good morning, Megan. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're talking Block, the former Square. Stock's been under pressure this week. There's some news out on buy now, pay later regulations, perhaps. But, the stock's down 13% this year. Megan, do you guys have the data that kind of supports the weakness here?
This is one of those names that now we're starting to keep an eye on because we do see some traction whenever we look at its different services and when we look at some of the macro trends in Block's ecosystem. The first being just adoption of digital wallets at large. When we look at its Cash App specifically, which is really trying to be a one-stop shop financially for a lot of consumers. And we see web visits up by about 21% year over year. And we're starting to see Cash App make some progress and tapping away at that market mind share, at least in terms of Venmo versus Cash App. When we look at, mentions at large of the two services, we see Venmo commands about 60% of our consumer mind share versus a Cash App, but starting to see signs that Cash App is making some improvements. You can see here how it's overperforming Venmo on this chart. So I think that that's one thing that the company has going for it for sure, just continued growth. I think it counts 57 million monthly active users. So this is certainly already a large pot, but potentially growing, at least according to our data. And then another is that buy now, pay later element that you mentioned. Block acquired Afterpay. And so this is something that we're monitoring pretty closely because we see as consumers are stretched, they're increasingly turning to services like these buy now, pay later services. And overall consumer happiness with Afterpay is rising tremendously. That's up pretty significantly, and you can see that on the chart there. And we also have overall mentions of consumers who are talking about Afterpay and using Afterpay up by about 91% year over year. So for better or for worse, more consumers are indicating, at least in our data, that they're using this service. And we know that Block takes, obviously, a transaction fee when consumers are using something like its Afterpay service. So these are two elements for us that show some positivity. And so we sometimes like to see that when the stock is heading in one direction and our data is starting to head in the other direction. So we're starting to see the first signs of a potential positive divergence for Block.
Megan, when we look at this, clearly on the outside of Afterpay, and the wrong side of the ledger for happiness, so we'll set that aside. I want to talk a little bit about the year-over-year change in visits, where we sort of see a stagnant PayPal and Venmo. Is this more of a reflection that they've sort of saturated the market in terms of getting new users? Like, I've still, in my life, I guess, never encountered a single person in my social circle that uses Cash App. It's all Venmo and a little bit of PayPal or Zelle. So in my mind, it's like there's plenty of market for them to capture. I'm just not, I guess, encountering it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I'm similar. I'm the Venmo power user, I think, but I have used certain elements of, one thing we haven't talked about is Square. And that is another area that whenever we see year over year visits, that's rising pretty significantly. So that could be a positive sign just in terms of merchant adoption. I know every week whenever the company that mows my lawn charges me, I square up through that platform. So it's interesting to see some adoption there just in my personal life, but also reflected in our data. But yeah, like you mentioned, we do see some stagnation in PayPal and Venmo. That's kind of an underperformance there and something to be mindful of because it's interesting to now start to see that traction in Cash App and Square. There's obviously things and changes that the company is making to make the platform better, to make the platform potentially stickier from a consumer user base because we're seeing those visits rise and overall pretty high levels of consumer happiness levels from those users.
Megan, with the Afterpay, that seems to be offsetting some of the losses or offsetting some of the less happiness on their Square and Cash App portions of their business. But when you guys look at this one, does Bitcoin fit into this narrative at all? Because, Bitcoin's just below 70K right now. It's been on the rise as far as the headline. And, they're trying to delve more into this. Is that coming into play at all in this stock? And do you guys have a rating on this one?
Yeah, so whenever we look at this, when we look at consumer interest in Bitcoin specifically, we see it rising really significantly this year. Just overall interest in cryptocurrency is rising, and this helps Square or Block. Obviously, it's kind of really doubled down on this, and we see the company really investing in its Bitcoin services or in its ability to provide these services for consumers who are interested in Bitcoin, but also being more efficient with perhaps its headcount and its user base. I think on its last call, it said that it dedicated about 3% of its company resources to its Bitcoin products, but it's continually investing in Bitcoin. So we do see this as a long-term tailwind for Block at large, and definitely was something that we see driving more interest in its Cash App specifically.
All right, great stuff. Great data. As always, Megan, have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, that's Megan Brantley, Vice President of Research at Lightfolio, joining us, breaking it down. Alex, yeah, I'm with you. I use Zelle and PayPal sparingly.